So I'm gonna be honest with you guys when talking about Godzilla Minus One. I have nothing new to say when talking about this movie because everybody is right about this movie. And I want to give a special shout out to Justin Lomas over at JJ Lomas Entertainment. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have checked out this film. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have watched this movie 3 times in the theater because it's that good. I have never seen a movie 3 times in the theater. Ever. The most I've ever seen was twice with a couple of films. Especially when I wanted to show someone a certain film. I thought that was going to be the same case with this one because I saw it once by myself in color, and then I showed my wife the in color, and then they released the black and white minus one minus color version about a week ago, and I went and saw that version, and that's what led me to make a video about this. Even though I've seen this movie like almost 2 months ago, I really want to talk about it. And I love this movie so much that I honestly want to go back and talk about every single one of the Godzilla films, regardless if they're a Toho production or if they were American made. I want to talk about Godzilla now. So before I get into it, I do want to say that this is my first Toho Godzilla film, and I've only seen the American ones, the 98 version and the 2014 version alongside Godzilla vs. Kong. This is my first Japanese Toho Kaiju Godzilla film. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to divide it into 2 sections, sort of. Spoiler-free version is going to be in color, and then when I get into spoilers, it's going to be in black and white. And one more thing before I get into it, every time that I saw this movie, the theater was absolutely packed. Given it was, a smaller theater, and it would only seat like 40 or 50, but every time I saw this film, it was mostly packed, and I thought that was just awesome because this movie deserves it, and it's an event film that I highly recommend seeing. If there's any time left, you need to see the minus color version. It's a really great way to see a really great film. First thing I want to get into is the positives, and my first positive when talking about this movie is the characters, which is something I thought I would never say when talking about a Godzilla film, because every time that I watch one of the American films, I don't care about the characters. I just want to see Godzilla tear shit up. Given he does do this in this film, but it's full of dread and depression and a little bit of hope, but I'm getting way too much into it, but yeah, every time that I saw an American film, I did not care about the characters whatsoever. I just wanted to see Godzilla tear shit up. Which I think this film is a great change of pace when it comes to the Godzilla franchise, because we follow Shikishima, who is a failed kamikaze pilot, and we see the guilt and torment he goes through throughout the film. Also, his story arc is something to behold because we see him go from being a coward to a straight up hero by the end of it. Even all the secondary characters shine, regardless if it's Noriko, Akiko, Sumiko, Kenji Noda, Tachibana, alongside Akitsu and Mizushimi. I hope I pronounced those names right. I know I'm really bad at pronunciation. Never would I thought I wouldn't mind not seeing Godzilla in his own film, because these characters are great. Like I said, the main character that we follow is great. The secondary characters are great. I like everyone in this film has a moment to shine, regardless if it's a line delivery or if it's a joke or, it's their character arc. Everyone in this film is fantastic. But like I said, it's usually a problem whenever we don't get enough Godzilla in a Godzilla film. But speaking of Godzilla, Godzilla is an absolute terror in this film. Every time that he shows up on screen, I get literal chills. And to be honest, I'm on the edge of my seat. Every time that I watch this, I know what happens, by the end of it. But every time, I'm just really, eager to see what happens. Even though I already know what happens, I'm on the edge of my seat, wanting to see what happens next. It's weird when you've seen a movie 3 times in the theater, but it still grips you every single time. And to be honest, I've never been scared of Godzilla. Until now. Every time that he shows up, I have this sense of dread. And at times, I'm going to be honest, it's a bit overwhelming. Also, the Ginza scene, the second time we see him use his heat ray, that whole scene, every time that I watch it, I feel like I'm gonna, end up in tears, which I hate to admit that, but, a Godzilla film did that to me. Every time I see that scene, even clips on YouTube, when I rewatch that scene, I get chills every time, and I just get this overwhelming sense of dread. And speaking of his heat ray or his atomic breath, they call it heat ray in this film, even though it's been called his atomic breath, but his atomic breath / heat ray in here is probably the best I've ever seen. regardless, I've only seen 4 Godzilla films. But the Ginza scene when he uses his heat ray, it's fantastic. I don't have much to say about that. Like, it's great. You need to see it. I also really like Godzilla's design in here. It's honestly one of my favorites that I've seen so far, and it is a bit nostalgic from clips I've seen from different Godzilla films throughout the 80s and 90s, and I thought that was a really nice touch. I'm also really glad that this film got nominated at the Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects, and I think it deserves it because, like, as everyone talks about when talking about Godzilla Minus One, this film has a budget less than $15 million. The director himself, Takashi Yamazaki, has said he wished he had $15 million, so I'm guessing it's around $10 to $12 million. But what he did with that budget is phenomenal, and I have to give credit to where credit is due. Hollywood, take notes, okay? There is no need to have films with budgets from 150 million to 350 million because most of the time you're not going to make that much of a profit. This film has already made over 102 million at the box office on less than a $15 million budget. So it's made almost 10 times its budget. And that's just crazy. A Godzilla film, of all things. And speaking of top-notch stuff, the music and score in here is absolutely phenomenal. It's been years since I've gone for a walk or went to the gym and put on a movie soundtrack. This changed that. I've listened to the entire soundtrack at least 5 to 10 times. I'm gonna mispronounce this name, okay? I'm very sorry, but Naoki Sato's music in here is absolutely phenomenal. And the first time I watched this, hearing the music, I love that they incorporate like the old school score as well. First time I saw this, I was like, they need to make a black and white version of this. And thankfully they did. They knew what they were doing, okay? The music in here is phenomenal. I have to give credit where credit is due. It's one of the best parts of this film. And I think his music just really like works because it fits with the tone and it fits with the message that this film is trying to convey. But speaking of seeing it in black and white, I'm glad that they released a minus color version because if you think about it, this is basically like a spiritual prequel to the original Godzilla from 1954 and the setting that they use in here, you know, with it being World War II, or at least the end of World War II, you know, and a couple years later. The black and white version makes sense. The setting is very consistent throughout, and it's impressive the amount of detail that they put into like certain airplanes and tanks. I just thought it was really impressive. And I love that the director pays homage to the original Godzilla film alongside Jaws and a couple other of the Godzilla sequels from the 80s and 90s. You know, whether it be a scene involving a boat in Godzilla, that's very Jaws. Godzilla picking up a train in his mouth, that's the original film, or simply just the look of Godzilla. Like I said, it's very reminiscent of like the 80s and 90s design, and I thought that was really cool. So now on to the mix section of this review. Fair warning, we are going into spoiler territory now. While I love the Ginza scene, it's one of the best in the film, they use a certain trope that I'm not a fan of. It's used in countless films, but it's where a character sacrifices themselves in order to save someone else, even though both could have easily survived. In this film, Noriko sacrifices herself after Godzilla uses his atomic breath / heat ray. She pushes Shimashika in between two buildings, and the blast from his atomic breath / heat ray destroys the rest of the city. And her sacrificing herself, the reason why it's in the mix section, I think they executed it perfectly, and every time that I've seen that scene, it just gets to me, even though I am tired of films using that trope countless times in other films. And another thing, I'm mixed on the fact that Noriko actually survived, because you see Shimashika's neighbor get a telegram, and we don't know what that telegram is until the end of the film, and it turns out Noriko survived the blast, which, like I said, the reason why I'm mixed on it is because they executed it perfectly, and I feel as if this film needed that type of ending. You know, there was a lot of dread and depression throughout the film with just a dash of hope, and this film ended on such a perfect note and just a happy note that I was a fan of it. Some people aren't a fan of it. You know, like I said, it's in the mix section for a reason, because, like I said, I don't like the fact that she survived. Countless other films have done this before, but most other films don't get that emotion out of me that they're trying to convey. This one does. But we do see a certain black mass in the back of Noriko's neck. So a lot of people theorize that it's G cells, which is from other Godzilla films. I don't know much about that yet, but it could be that. I'm not entirely sure. And she was in an interview saying maybe she'll be the next Godzilla. Maybe she'll be the one, tearing up the city. And I thought that was like really interesting, But I do need a sequel to this film. I need it, okay? Speaking of which, they need an American physical media release. I tried to look for Shin Godzilla on physical media. I was going to get the Blu-ray, before Godzilla Minus One came out, and it was like $9 or $10. Now it's like $90. I'm not spending that type of money on a Blu-ray. There is a 4K in Japan, but it doesn't have English subtitles. So that sucks. But that's besides the point. I've been rambling on too much. But after we see, the black mass in the back of her neck, we do see what's left of Godzilla start to regenerate, and I thought that was awesome. The musical note that they end the movie with was phenomenal. But like I said, I'm glad that the entire main cast survived, because Akiko does not need to be orphaned for a second time, and this movie needed that ending, to be honest. So with that said, we're going to get into the negatives. And what's the negative, you might say? Plenty of others may bring up, the ending involving Noriko. Some others may bring up the visual effects. But like I said, considering the budget of this film, I'm not complaining, okay? There are times where it's noticeable, but the black and white version hides it very well. But that's besides the point. My only negative with this film is the fact that, after they talk about their plan to take Godzilla down, there's a scene where they're all just hanging out, drinking or just eating, having dinner. If I knew that Godzilla was going to be back sometime soon, I would not be sitting on my ass talking with friends over dinner. Like I said, that's my only negative with this film. And even then, I was grasping. I'm like, I need to put something into the negatives. Yeah, but that's it. But with that said, I'm going to be giving Godzilla Minus One an overall grade of a 92%. I'm going to be honest, this movie made me want to go back and watch the entire franchise. The Toho produced and the American made films. I want to watch them all. And speaking of which, I'm going to be reviewing the entire Godzilla franchise, which consists of 38 films. It's going to be 39 in March or April. I forgot when Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, comes out, but I'm excited to talk about these films. I'm going to try and talk about one every 2 weeks. But I want to know your opinions in the comments below. Should I do it chronologically, or should I go from Godzilla Minus One to Shin Godzilla back to the beginning? Let me know in the comments. But with that being said, I just want to say thank you as always for watching my videos, commenting, everything you do. It really does mean a lot. And as always, I just want to say, I hope to see you in the next video.